at both entrances. Incorporating covered entryways at both frontage entrances. Incorporate a covered area in the lower amenity space, and strongly encourage consideration of an additional rooftop amenity area. The application proceeded to council on September 6th, and council passed a resolution referring this application back to the advisory design panel to include further review and request to address a number of items. So that application then proceeded to council, had variances included in the application. It was public notification, so members of the public shared their thoughts on the proposal. And so after hearing from the public and considering their own deliberations on the application, there were a few items that council wanted this panel to look at specifically. And those were affordable housing, retention of rental units, retention of mature trees, a shade study, a geotechnical study, and a change to the design, including building setback, pedestrian interface, and height. As I've noted in the staff report, some of these items are not typically matters that can be considered by council or the panel, particularly with development permit applications that don't include variances. So the only criteria that the panel and council can use in assessing the application is the development permit area guidelines and whether or not the proposal complies with those guidelines. There are certainly some items that are definitely within the purview of the guidelines and the panel and council, in particular, the reference to change to the design, including building setback, pedestrian interface, and height. But just acknowledging that one of the changes that the proponent made to their design was to reduce the height to comply with the maximum 5-story height in the zoning. So there's no longer a height variance request as part of the application. It's just a few maps. Subject property is highlighted. There's 4 parcels right now. In total, the area is just under 3/4 of an acre. The properties are zoned high density residential, which is that blue area. The map on the right is a relatively recent air photo of the subject properties. 2 site photos, which we can refer back to in the discussion if we need to, but here's an image on the Bray Road side of the development site. Still on Bray Road, looking directly on to the site. Again, looking from the opposite side of Bray Road back towards the site. This image is more or less in the center of the site, looking towards Bray Road in the background. So you can see the commercial building on the other side of Bray Road, and the adjacent residential building immediately to the north. I believe it's called the Cedars. This image is looking down towards Ypres Street. So the site slopes. It's one of the few areas in Duncan which has a pretty significant topography change across the site. So it slopes down from Bray Road to Ypres Street. This image is on the other side, on the east side of Ypres Street, looking back towards and up towards the site. Looking down Ypres Street to the adjoining development to the north, as well as the retaining wall and parking structure for that apartment building. And the last image is again looking back towards the site, west towards the site. There's also a multifamily residential building immediately to the south of the development site. And the remaining slides are the development drawings, but I think I'm going to pass it over to the applicant now, who I presume has a presentation and will speak to their development proposal and some of the changes they've made to the design as a result of feedback from the panel and from council. But if we need to refer back to these drawings in the discussion, we have the drawings in the PowerPoint and we can do that. So I'm going to stop my share now, and Mr. Chair, and I believe the applicant has a presentation as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kyle. And who from the team will be speaking? And can you introduce your team?
Yeah. Thanks through the chair. My name is Matthew Fitzgerald. I'm a planner with West Urban Developments. I'm joined here with Rob Pringle, who's our manager of building design, James Dallas, who is the project architect, as well as Akeem Muller, who's the project landscape architect. I think Kyle did a pretty good job with the background here, so I think we can go right into the tour of the building. So James has got the model ready, similar to last time. We'll tour through the building, and then the team is available to take any questions that the panel may have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I should be sharing my screen, and it should be showing at the updated version of the model. And we're viewing the project from Ypres. And as you see, the fundamental configuration of the building adopts very much a similar approach to the previous development permit submission, with a couple notable exceptions, namely the reduction of the height along Ypres to maintain our building envelope and remove the variance on our building height along Ypres. Along Bray, we've added an additional floor, make up some of the area that we relocated from the Ypres side, and we've added that additional floor on top of Bray to get us to a 5-story building height on this section of the building. But it's significantly set back from Bray, so it has reduced the impact, still maintaining a sense of a 4-story massing across Bray, consistent to current building envelope along that street. This also accommodates, and we've maintained accommodation for a rooftop patio along this building facade along Bray. And but the significant condition that has changed between the previous scheme and this scheme is, a much more formal separation of the two buildings, between the one facing Bray and then the one addressing Ypres. This was dictated primarily by an existing power pole that further discussions with the electrical team has suggested the removal and allocation of which would be quite challenging. So the building now responds to the requisite setback and clearances required from this adjacent transformer, which has resulted in this allocation of building masses and a more explicit separation of the Ypres building with the Bray side of the building. This also really allowed us to respond to City Council's request for affordable housing units. We've introduced 14 studio units or micro units that meet the guideline, which is no greater than 20 square meters. So we have 14 of those those units, and you see them stacked roughly in this location here, where we needed to accommodate the setback from that transformer location. The building design follows very much a similar aesthetic design approach and materiality approach from the previous development permit submission that we presented to this panel a number of months ago. It also has accommodated and allowed us to create two distinct but associated material palette, so that we are trying to create some distinction from the previous submission. There were comments about articulating and adding a little bit more by way of palette and change of materiality. We've been able to do that by kind of color coding the buildings between Bray and Ypres, and then fundamentally tying them together with the limestone-ish cladding that we're connecting the bases to. These bases are still fundamentally connected as per the previous submission with a two-layer parquet configuration that both buildings sit on in terms of a central base. And we've maintained the raised plaza amenity space and feature, and then also maintained the rooftop amenity space over top of the building facing Bray. We actually haven't really lost any additional amenity space. That little alley that we've been able to provide between the two buildings is really just an addition to that amenity space. The reduction of the building in terms of height, and then the reallocation of those units on top of Bray that accommodate a similar building size, but we were also able to find some accommodations in additional amenity space, namely that alley between the two buildings connected to the amenity space feature. So the circulation is a little bit more public and a bit more of an explicit connection and addressing from the Bray side of the building to the Ypres side of the building. We have maintained a lot of the features that we originally talked about with respect to entrances and bike parking conditions. So we try to address many of the conditions raised at City Council, but still aligned with a lot of the positive feedbacks we got from some of the design iterations we previously submitted as part of our original design panel or our design presentation. That's pretty much my presentation, and I just wanted to make sure that there's a clear understanding and the articulation of this building, a little easier to read with the three-dimensional model. Happy to get into some of the details or look at very particular perspectives, should anybody from the panel desire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the team want to address other aspects of this, like from a landscaping perspective or what have you, or would you like to just to proceed to questions from the proponent side?
Yeah, please, if we could take on any questions, and certainly if there's landscape questions, we can take those.
Okay, well, let's open it up for questions, and then we'll move into a discussion period. Oh, I see that Councillor Gary Bruce has joined us. Thank you very much, Councillor. Thanks for being able to join us. Oh, you're on mute there. Yeah, you're still on mute, Councillor. Oh.
Thanks, you guys. Sorry I'm late. I had a little problem with my iPad here. I'm sure it's the city's fault, not mine, of course. So anyway, I'm here now. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we've just finished the formal presentation, Councillor, from the proponents and from our chief planner. And so we're moving into now more of a general sort of, well, first a question sort of an answer period, and then we'll move into discussion and proceed from there. So from anything else from you, Kyle, before we move into question and answer?
You can jump right into questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's open it up to our panel members. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and greetings. This project's all new to me right now, sort of back in the saddle here, and I'm a little behind schedule. I've been feeling like crap after a holiday, so I'll do my best to interject here. A couple of questions. I don't, short of going into the detail of reading the entire presentation, is there a sustainability plan, or are there any environmental issues that you've addressed in this project? I haven't seen any thus far. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I guess starting off on the sustainability side of things, this is an infill site. It's taking advantage of existing services in the close to the downtown area. So there's certainly a lot to say on the sustainability side in terms of increasing access to transit and walkability. We are also targeting this building to be built to step 3. So in terms of building performance, step 3 would be the standard we're designing to.
Well, that's code. Yeah, that's code anyways, but that'll be code in January, I believe, wouldn't it, Kyle?
Yeah,
or pretty close, pretty close. Anyways, anything beyond that, Matthew? Like real any green initiatives here that you've inputted? I haven't seen any solar ready. Are we doing any of this?
None of that's programmed into the building right now, but certainly if the panel has recommendations on that, we're open to suggestions on how we could look at different things like solar ready.
Pretty much a no-brainer. So that's pretty much it then on your sustainability sales pitch on this one?
That's all we have today. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Kyle, I saw that your hand was up.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, there was a question asked earlier about the BC Energy Step Code. So as of January, Step 2 for Part 3 complex buildings will be required, and the applicant is committing to Step 3, which is a higher level of energy efficiency for the building.
Okay, thank you. David, did you have a follow-up question?
I have more discussion as opposed to questions, Mr. Chairman.
Got you. Okay, thank you. And from Mallory, any questions before we go into discussion?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on the step backs on either sides of the building, because the building is like the building itself isn't stepped back, but the facade is stepped back. So I'm wondering if you could just review some of the step backs really quickly.
Yeah, thanks for that question, James. Would you be able to explain that with the model?
Yes, but it might be a little easier if I just use our site plan, where we have a side yard setback of 1.5 meters on either side. That setback gets wider as we get closer towards Ypres because of the easement. But along the Bray side of the building, building B, 1.5 either side, with a 3-meter setback from the front. On the Ypres building, we're still also maintaining a 1.5 meter along the north end, a 3-meter setback along the front with a bit of articulation on the front facade. And then obviously a significant setback as we accommodate the parkade drive aisle.
Okay, no further questions right now. Open to discussion.
Okay, thank you. Yes, David. Oh, you're on mute.
You mentioned 14 studio micro 20 square meter units affordable. What's affordable in your description?
I believe we're meeting that. It was a no greater than a 20 square meter footprint for units that could be described as affordable. And so these units come in at exactly 20 square meters.
So what is affordable?
Yeah.
Oh, those are the parameters that were provided by us.
Affordable by size, but what does affordable mean?
Yeah.
Is there going to be a cap on the rent, or?
There would be a cap on the rent. One of the aspects of this program is we would be going after the CMHC MLI financing program.
Of course.
So through that program, there is caps on the the rent that could be charged, which pegs it to an average rent for Duncan. So there is caps on the rental rates that could be charged for those units.
Just for those 20 units?
It would be 15% of the units. So it doesn't have to necessarily be the micro suites.
Right. And I saw some mention that the city wanted to, they'd recommended some form of perpetuity for the rental agreements. Is that something that you've arranged and we've got in place this time?
Yeah, that's something that actually it's through the new home warranty exemption program. So we have to register a covenant on title, certifying that the units will be maintained as rental in perpetuity. So that will be done.
That is being done.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor, do you have it looks like you have your hand up there.
Oh, good.
There
we
you go.
I'm on Paige's computer here. Anyway, Kyle sent us a list of thoughts from the neighborhood group that is being quite active looking at this building. There were quite a number of items. Is this a time to go down through those items at all, or is it just that's not appropriate at this time? I just didn't know what the. Go ahead, Kyle. Or excuse me. I mean, yeah.
Yep, that's fine. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Bruce. So that email was really just sent as an FYI for the panel. There are certainly lots of pieces in that email that have to do with the design of the building and the site. There are other elements that are unrelated to the development permit area guidelines. So that was really meant as just an FYI for the panel, acknowledging that that's not normal practice, that the panel would receive public input, that council's role is to receive public input. So it wasn't the intent that this panel go through that list sequentially. It was just an FYI.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bruce, I mean, you can make some of those elements your own if you're in agreement with what the community has written there. So if you want to proceed in terms of questions out of that, I don't see.
I have a few of my own too, and one of them, could Matthew talk about livability, if you will, and say the roof gardens. One building has it and the other does not. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There's the one patio or rooftop garden on the Bray building, and then there is a central patio over the parkade between the buildings as well.
And so that was another of my questions. When I'm looking at this plan, I'm looking at, it looks like 2 levels of parking under virtually the whole lot. Is that correct?
That's correct, except for the drive aisle going into the site. The parkade would cover nearly all of the site. Okay,
and on that area between the buildings, is there plantings going on there? The actual quite a large area in between the 2 buildings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is, that space is programmed. It is on top of the parkades. So it's limited in terms of what we can plant there, but the panel will have seen the landscape plan that was provided in support of this application. And you can see that it is programmed with not only our recreational space or play space, but also seating areas and then planter box areas.
Thank you.
Okay. I see that. Yes, Mallory, go ahead, please.
I am curious about the trees. Previously, there was some larger trees, and now they're gone. So none of the trees have been retained. And I know that was a comment that was made previously. And so I just want to hear from the applicant about why none of the existing trees have been maintained. And I understand the comment that it's not possible to do so because of how close the development would be. But I work as an architect in an area where we do preserve a lot of trees and we develop around them. So I'm just curious about the decision to remove and all of the larger trees.
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. I guess the first part of that is like we did do an arborist assessment as part of the development, or our initial phases of the development. And in terms of the more substantial trees or larger trees, the ones on the Bray frontage, it was noted that they've been severely topped or trimmed due to their conflict with the hydro lines over the years. So it's at least twice the large cedar and fir there have been pruned away, leading to degrading their health and making it questionable whether they could survive any sort of development on the site. With all the other larger trees, particularly the maples in the center of the site, any sort of development of the site would be in conflict with these. And if you look at species like big leaf maples, they don't tend to do well with any sort of disruption to the hydrology of the soils. So given that we're digging a parkade throughout the site to accommodate parking, the thought is that those trees just simply wouldn't be able to survive. And then trees more on the periphery would also be impacted, although those trees are much smaller. There is the opportunity to potentially keep some of the trees on the Ypres frontage. But this is something that we'd have to explore further with the city as part of the development. We'd have to upgrade Ypres frontage with new roadway frontage. So again, that would potentially impact those trees. And the thought is that given the unlikeliness of any tree to survive the development, that replacing trees is the path that we've taken. And so I hope that provides some clarity.
Okay, and then the other thing that I'm wondering about is the massing along Ypres Street. If you could maybe just speak to that a little bit. There was a comment I know from the people in the neighborhood that the massing along Ypres at the front entry to the development seems quite large for that side of the street. So I'm just wondering if you could provide some thoughts around the massing at the entry.
Sure. If I could redirect that question to James, please, to address.
The articulation that we have along Ypres, I mean, we did provide a fairly strong entry condition. We added the canopy along the front entry where we have bicycle parking. We've pushed most of our public interface, which would allow a significant amount of windows. So we're putting a lot more windows against Ypres where we have the vertical elevator lobby conditions, as well as the main entry into the building along Ypres. And we've created a fairly significant entry condition along that base. Provided the requisite setback for the waste and recycling access, very limited opportunities there as well for us to provide that service. And then we have taken a fairly structured approach to how we manipulate that facade. We understand it is sort of the tallest facade on the entire development, and it's facing directly Ypres. And we want to maintain, obviously, some reasonable structural alignment, but by virtue of balcony considerations, we're taking a lot of the formal massing and compositional details and turning corners with them. So we have a highly articulated facade, even though agreed it is the tallest facade that we have along Ypres.
Okay, Kyle, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one thing I wanted to point out, because I believe two of the voting members today were not at the previous ADP meeting when this application came forward. So and maybe I can share the image of the Ypres massing, because the old plans actually had a lot less articulation on that Ypres side compared to what you're seeing now under the current plans. And I don't know if it'd be helpful to show that, but and just maybe to clarify, is that what you were asking about, Mallory, was the massing? Because I think what I heard at the council meeting anyway was that it was that sort of the appearance of a 7-story mass along Ypres Street, and people were definitely concerned about that. So the new plans have more articulation than the old plans that came to ADP.
Yeah, I mean, if it's possible to share the previous submission, I think that would be really helpful for the 2 members who weren't at that meeting.
Mr. Chair, is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I'm just going to do a screen share again. Superseded submission plans. Can you see the plans on my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, well, yeah, I mean, this first image here shows you the kind of the appearance of that 7 stories. There's a little bit of articulation at the uppermost stories, but we can just scroll through the plans here. Just bear with me. I'll get to the renderings. Yeah, so the top image again shows, so where I have my cursor is the Ypres frontage. So you can see, you know, looking south to north or north to south, you can see that it's a pretty tall mass structure along that frontage, and that's what I heard people were certainly concerned about. And we do have development permit area guidelines that talk about stepping the upper stories of the building back to reduce that massing. So if you can see this on my screen, so that the 2 images on the left, again, are showing that Ypres, the Ypres face of that building. And just to compare it to what we're looking at today, this is the current plan, which reduces the overall height of the building and includes much more stepping on the upper stories of the building.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So I'll stop my share now.
Great. Thank you very much, Kyle. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, well, I've got a few questions as well before we sort of proceed into discussion if there aren't any further questions beyond mine here. So one is around the bike parking. I'm curious, so right now what's currently proposed is like the barrier, like it kind of faces into sort of that common area, and where you're parking your bikes kind of faces out. And as some of you, maybe most of you know, I live really close by. I know the area. I know the security issues in the area, the safety issues very well. I live around the corner from Bray. And and this is more a question, I guess, at this point is why the exposure of the sort of the bike area there. The wall is sort of on the inside. Why not on the outside? It just creates the potential for bike theft, for one. And secondly, I think like people, it's just like a bit of a disincentive for people to want to park their bikes there when the wall is on the inside. So I'm curious about that barrier. So it's one question. I've got a couple of other questions around the trees, but maybe we can start there as to why the little wall is on the inside rather than the outside.
Sure. Well, thanks for that question. So I guess firstly, in addition to that, the surface bike parking, there is the bike parking within the parkade. So certainly that's more secure if the concern is around bikes potentially getting stolen. But as far as the surface parking, James, maybe if you could address that part of the question.
Yes, the access for the bike parking, exterior bike parking along Bray really is just a consideration of just the ease of use and getting access in and out, and providing that almost as sort of a public condition to support additional pedestrian movement from Bray into the raised amenity space. But I don't know that I can really defend your concerns about security, because I think those are things that we can certainly consider. in terms of adding additional gates. What we certainly don't want to do is we don't want to have too great of a visual impact along that side yard, because we want a real connection to the pedestrian connection along Bray, along that side yard into the raised plaza. I think there are considerations we can make in terms of making it slightly more secure without creating an enclosure, which was something that we wanted to avoid.
Can I say something to that also, James?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the other thing to consider is that wall it's not a tall wall. So from the plan, maybe from the model, you can see it better. So there is visibility from that amenity space, let's say across towards where the bikes are parked, and also there's there's visibility, let's say, from the units that are surrounding that that amenity area. So there's like some level of social control, you could argue, to some extent. I mean, I know there's always and it's outside, there's always a chance that things might happen, but I think between the visibility from the amenity area, visibility from the units, there's lighting also proposed there. So there is, that it does increase the visibility also at night of that area. So, and then, as James hinted, there could be additional gates put in so that maybe there's more control to who can access that space. That maybe might help with the safety for the bike parking there. But otherwise, I think it's kind of a good location to put some of the bikes there, a little bit out of the main, main visible areas of the front of the building, so that stays nice, kind of a little bit more appealing and clean in that sense.
Okay, thank you. I had a question also around the trees, in terms of proposed trees. Like in your last sort of iteration of this proposal, you had 5 emerald maples, and in this current version, they've been replaced by 3 lindens. And I'm curious to know as to why that is.
So I think that it's a matter of the the available space that we have to grow some of the trees. So as you can see, the setback of the building, and that's just a condition of how far the building can be set back. We didn't want to propose large large canopy shade trees, because eventually they will just grow into the building. And that will lead to excessive pruning of the trees. They will lose their nice form and so forth. So that's why we proposed some smaller trees that will be a little bit more columnar, a little bit more contained, so that it works better with the building facade that we have. And the same thing on the back and the Ypres Street. And this is something that we try to, and I think maybe in this panel or elsewhere we can get some more feedback on that. There's currently a power line, that is shown along Ypres Street, which is also why we're proposing smaller trees along that frontage, so that they can be staying below the power lines. But if those power lines can be removed, or if the plan is to remove them or put them on the ground, potentially you could plant larger trees there, larger shade trees, larger canopies, taller trees.
Okay, thank you. The other question related to trees was around the retention of any of the trees that were left, or any of the current sort of mature trees. And I understand the reasoning behind almost all of them coming down. There are a couple of dogwoods on the periphery, and I'm wondering if there was any discussion around retaining the 2 dogwoods. And they're on either side of the entire site, and they're actually listed by the arborist in fairly decent condition or moderate condition. So I'm curious about that as well, about the dogwoods.
Yeah, I believe one of the dogwoods is kind of straddling the property line, so that's one that we would be retaining. And then the other one, we haven't planned on retaining, but certainly something we could investigate if that's the direction of the panel.
Okay, and then one more question, just to clarify around how much affordable rental housing that you're proposing here, because I didn't actually, maybe I just glossed over, I didn't actually see it in this latest iteration. So you're proposing 92 units, 20% of that, which would be 14 units, you're proposing to be affordable rental. Is that correct?
15% would be have rents pegged to a medium rental rate in Duncan, and that's set by CMHC in the financing program that we're going after.
15%.
So it's something that CMHC would require of us, and I believe they require a covenant. I'm not 100% sure on how they secure those units long term. If it'd probably be through a covenant that they register on title, and setting the rents and which units are subject to those discounted rents.
Okay, so 15% of the 92 units would be designated affordable rental, and the rest market rental.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and it's also up to CMHC to determine then which of the units would be subject to the 15%, or is that something that you would be proposing?
It's something that we would propose, and ultimately at the discretion of CMHC, though.
Okay, and what are you proposing at this point in terms of a mix, or are you proposing a mix for the affordable?
We haven't identified which units we would be designating, other than that 15% of the overall units would be within those program requirements.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions from the panel before we move into discussion? Oh, yes, go ahead, Mallory.
Yeah, previously there was a large stair in the upper courtyard, and the courtyard area in general was kind of like a little bit bigger. And I think one of the things I really liked about the last proposal was the stair, because the stair essentially creates safety for all of the people that are in the playground below, and it means that there's eyes on things like the bike rack and all sorts of things. You know, when you might be visible from somewhere, people behave a little bit differently. And I noticed that you've now removed the public stair. And I'm just kind of hoping that you can speak to the decision to do that. Well, I wouldn't say public stair, but it was the stair, I guess, on the Bray Road side, adjacent to the landscaped area.
Yeah, I guess the dominant reason there is with the reduction in height, we lost quite a few units. And so to make up the units, we did double load, or have units on both sides of the building in that case. But I don't know if James has any other design perspectives on that.
Yeah, the program reallocation and setting the building footprints with reasonable accommodation of exiting and the placement of units from the previously higher floors was the major considerations. We did try and revision that design condition, namely as a connection between buildings. But at the end of the day, as we separated these two buildings, the two buildings really wanted to be two separate buildings, and maintaining the height considerations, which was one of the technical reasons why we looked at reducing that height, was to try and maintain an opportunity to stay within code at a wood frame building. When we created these two separate buildings, we were able to do that. But then as soon as we connected, we started to get into that same problem of having then to go into a non-combustible building typology throughout the entire building, which was something that we were considering on the previous scheme. But with this opportunity, or with the alignment and reshifting of some of the massing, our opportunity to stay within that maximum 6 stories did give us the accommodation to come in without a variance, aligned to wood frame construction. And then we worked hard with the landscaping team to ensure that we have, now we've got periphery adjacencies with respect to units and their own private amenity spaces that front and are adjacent to the entire plaza. So it was a consideration, and it was something that we did strive to try and maintain, but at the end of the day, technically it was very challenging. And so we just dealt with the landscape team to ensure that we've got like a real strong amenity feature with public eyes on grade with adjacent amenity spaces.
So can the people that are in the building without the rooftop garden access the rooftop garden of the other building, or is it specifically only for the residents of the building with the rooftop garden?
No, I don't see any reason they couldn't access it. It's certainly not programmed in right now that it would be restricted to only that building. So it would be available for all tenants of the two buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bruce. Oh, you're on mute, Councillor.
Unmute, Gary.
Yeah, it's going back and forth. There we go.
One sec. Oh, thank you. Mallory, I think the same. I'm concerned about the people in the building without the rooftop garden. And it looks like two distinct communities there right now, which is fine. But I hate to see us put that building up, that big flat roof, and not use it. We don't have a proliferation of parks in the area for sure. We're a little scant in that area, and I think I'm just wondering why Matthew, why wasn't a green roof put on that other building?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, I think there are two large amenity spaces. One is at grade, and the other is on the roof, and that's primarily the result of the size of the buildings and size of the development. So there isn't much space left over. So I think it does a very good job using spaces and delineating spaces that can be used by residents and have programming in them that makes them usable to all tenants of the two buildings. And then so I think if the concern is about the Bray building having the rooftop patio or rooftop deck area, that's something that we could maybe as a condition of development permit, Kyle, something like that deck area could be available to all residents, or maybe a recommendation of the panel, but certainly something that we're agreeable with.
Okay, thank you. Barring any further questions, maybe we can move into general discussion at this point. Yeah, okay, great. Let's open it up for a discussion then. Who would like to start from the panel here? Just general observations and comments. And yes, go ahead, David.
Well, I think, just to open this whole thing up, there's a huge missed opportunity on the city's part. Councillor Bruce, you noted we don't have too many green spaces nearby. This was the green space we had nearby, and we're going to look back in the future and regret not preserving this particular space on this knoll. And through this whole conversation, I keep hearing this need to work within the variances and work within the setbacks and so on. I'm seeing your classic push it to the max development here. 1.5 meter setback on each side of a project of this size is you can't even compare this to a residential project. We're not even allowed that on a residential site in most parts of the community. That narrow a setback on each side. So it's just simply overwhelming, this project. And I find it really, the first thing that strikes me is it turns its back on the city of Duncan. Its orientation is all to the east, to the highway, to the vehicle. It's very vehicle centric. And the Bray Road, the upper Bray Road side is just simply, it's just turned its back on the community. It should be spewing out, it should be feeding these people, all these residents, and giving them access to the community. And I just find that it's doing the exact opposite by putting up this this wall along Bray Street, which has become suddenly bigger with this new presentation, and less articulated than either the south wall or the east wall as far as coloration goes. So I mean, there's tons of room for improvement here, but I think the massing is just simply overwhelming. The massing to the south of that Bray Street piece is, I think, is overcrowding that east side of the property. Again, a 1.5 meter public or whatever bicycle access is just minuscule. The city has been going through that with their development guidelines and so on, and their developments in downtown for the last 2 decades. We've been opening up opportunities to create mid-block connection. This is a classic opportunity that's being missed here. I looked at this site, and it really reminded me of a mid-block green space I had when I was a child growing up in Windsor, and I've regretted losing it ever since as well, as did the community. That mid-block green space that we're all in need of. It really looks like it could be a nice park, but I guess this is all behind us now with the way the real estate market has gone and the stage of this application. But that's not to say that we can't allocate some portion of this to the community and bring this connection back in a physical sense. Call it a stairway to heaven. I liked your little comment about the stairway, Mallory. There's a missing element here. I mean, I don't know how many, God, I mean, there's a couple of movies that come to mind with New York movies San Francisco movies where they're hiking up a staircase, whether they're chasing bad guys or just doing some really cool urban music or whatever the case may be. But aesthetically, we're missing huge opportunities here for the sake of cramming 92 units into this site. I feel for the neighbors. I feel they're going to be losing out on an open green space. This is going to be overwhelming. This nothing short of a behemoth that's being created here on the site. I don't think very little has been addressed in terms of permeability. The heat sink that's obviously being created here. This is the top of the knoll of one of the warmest spots on the West Coast, and we're covering it in concrete. This is like yesterday's planning. And I really feel that for the amount of investment that's going into this project, that very little has been addressed in terms of permeability. Calling our setbacks too small to grow trees is just a really lame excuse for just simply overcrowding the site. We're taking down large mature trees. Granted, they're not going to make it. They've all been topped. Most of them are a mess. I'm not arguing with that situation, but it's a mature old site that's going to have all this kind of stuff going for it, and the community is going to miss it, regardless of whether these trees have been topped and they've grown haphazardly or not. They're going to miss this site, and we're going to be replacing it with oversized bushes. So really, it just doesn't do anything for me. The second rooftop is obviously a no-brainer. I mean, I just, you just have to go to a hotel complex. I mean, somebody living on the 6th floor of the Ypres Street side of this complex is not going to go down an elevator 6 floors, walk 250 feet, cross a common courtyard, and then up another staircase, 5 more floors to get onto a rooftop. I mean, we're making life. I mean, that's almost a challenge in itself. That's a day's work. You're going to need washrooms halfway just to take a break. Come on, this is not functioning. COVID has changed things, and we're just not keeping up with things. We have to be creating spaces that people are going to live in, and probably spend upwards to 24 hours a day living in, not just 8 hours a day living in, or 16. It's becoming 24, and these amenities are should be right at the top of the list. We need to be addressing amenities, the green space, the shading, the permeability, the ease and safe use of bike and transportation, and the connection to the downtown core, which is really missing in this project. The whole Bray Street side is just a blight on this project. It could easily be opened up architecturally, whether you just took a bite out of that south side of the project or opened up a nice logia kind of alcove in the center of that whole structure, so it connected to that common area, so it looked like it was the front door and not the back door. And I don't think there's any hope in saving those dogwoods, Eduardo. Not with a 1.5 meter setback. They're gonna be nuked. Yeah. After this discussion is done and after this list of recommendations or lack of recommendations going forward, I think the city really needs to sit down and review this density that they're bringing forward. This is not addressing David Evy's new thing here. This is just simply development for the sake of development. This is not providing just housing. It's development, clear and simple. So that's my rant. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David. Mallory, can I actually ask, I really need to go pee. I'm sorry, I need to step away. Can I ask one of you to chair while I go and do that? I'm so sorry. I've been holding it. David, maybe you can, since you've spoken, and facilitate the other two. Or sorry, Kyle.
Is free and clear. Go for it, Eduardo.
Eduardo, we only have 3.
Sorry, just piping up here. If one of you steps away, we lose quorum. So if you want to take a 5-minute recess, we can return.
Okay, let's do that. Sorry. I was wondering if that was gonna, yeah, okay, so it's 11:07, come back in 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you. All right, great. I think we can continue now. And this, of course, is recorded. The moment that it's recorded for all posterity. Okay, anyway, let's move ahead. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and whatnot in an awkward moment. All right, so thank you, David, for your comments. I also have some as well, but I'll wait until Mallory and Councillor Bruce has gone, if they have any.
Okay, I'm happy to jump in next. So I feel that a lot of the comments that were previously stated, I'm on board with all of them. I feel that the density of this project is a lot for what the site can handle. And I agree that it does fall within what the city's guidelines are, and it might be somewhat that the city is transitioning to higher density developments, but at the same time, this particular series of buildings, I think, is lacking in livability. You know, if you look at things like the Happy Homes Toolkit that was created by Happy City, and they start to talk about multifamily buildings for, developments that are over 100 people, which this would be well over 100 people on the site, and what they actually require in terms of amenity spaces. And I think the amenity spaces for well over 100 people are just kind of lacking. One of the things I appreciated about the previous design was the large stair that came from the rooftop down, because it creates a space for social engagement. I think a lot of cities in the world and in buildings that are multifamilies, people are really faced with a lack of social connection. And a lot of what we're trying to do in design is to try to facilitate those opportunities for social interaction. And when you go to your unit and you maybe don't have an amenity space or somewhere to actually, I guess, visit with your neighbors or make contact with your neighbors, it creates an interesting situation in terms of the building. I think the amenity space is one of the things it talks about in Happy Homes, is having amenity spaces with climate appropriate shelters. And so I think right now what we're seeing is trellises on the upper roof and also a trellis in the main amenity area, which we live in a rainforest and we get a lot of rain. So those amenity areas won't be usable for the majority of the year. So now you've got over 100 residents that are kind of locked in their, I shouldn't say locked, but are kind of in their apartments. And there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to interact with people. There's no social spaces for engagement. And I think that that's a loss for this particular project. I just don't think there's enough green space for 92 units. And it's one thing to kind of, lose all of the old growth and lose this park. But then I think that you can't have a green roof on one building and not necessarily on the other. And if you do, then you should have, some sort of large public stair or feature that connects applicants to it. I think that this sustainability plan in this case is lacking. To just say that it meets step 3 and it's an infill project, I mean, that's a lot of projects. I feel like there could be, more advanced sustainability features brought to the table on this project. With large buildings like this, another thing is to talk about, public art or ways that visually stimulate or engage people as they're moving through the space, especially at the ground plane, and we have a lot of flat surfaces and there's nowhere for real public art or things that visually stimulate or excite people. And I also don't think, I think that also tunes into the green space comment. Access to nature is strongly linked to positive community relationships. And so now you have a block that has all sort of hard surface textures and very little green space. I think that the green space needs to be increased, ideally, in my opinion. I just think that, and if that means there needs to be a little bit less density, then I think that that's what needs to happen here. But I also say that understanding that this project is within the setbacks and it's within the community guidelines. So there is that. One of the problems I see as well with the density is the lack of overall storage in the units. There's, you know, if they are for market or some of them are rental, there's really not a lot of storage for anywhere to when to put things. And, you know, in buildings of this scale, you end up wanting to have things like shared corridors or community managed childcare or areas for pets or community gardens. You know, you can have an outdoor station to walk a bike or to wash dogs. Or I just think that well, the reality is once you're over 4 stories, you kind of lose the connection to the street as a resident. That's proven that once you're over 4 stories, so you're kind of up in the air. So you have a significant portion of residents that have access to almost no green space, specifically in the building without a green roof. And I personally think that's a problem. I think that, you know, I kind of stand behind that it's too big and too dense for this site for, you know, well over 100 residents to happily live here. Yeah, those are my comments.
Great, thank you very much, Mallory. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Bruce.
Thank you. I totally agree with Mallory and with you too, David. And I feel that the livability of what we're doing to people right now is not healthy. And I think it's too much. Once again, too much, too big. And I don't like the idea that we've kind of skirted the idea of setbacks on the actual building itself. And I don't like the idea that we are only 1.5 meters with the setback, which I know is probably the city's guidelines. But for me, it's too much. I've lived in the city all my life, and I just don't like to see this massive stuff. And I know we need housing. I know that as well. But and the green roof, you got 2 soccer fields up there, and it would be nice to just have somewhere for those. I think there's 39 units in that building, and if they could get up top for some fresh air and outside and looking out over, I think that's a really good amenity. I totally agree with the fact that there's no, is it called permeability? Everything seems to be heading down the big pipe in the form of water runoff from the footings, from everything. Looking at the geological, it's all, there's nothing going back into the aquifer, as it were. And I agree with both Mallory and with David on their comments, and they're much more knowledgeable than I am. But I get so tired of us going win-lose. We got to have a win-win situation here for our residents, for the community, and that's what I'm shooting for, a win-win. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Bruce. For me, I also have some comments to add to the discussion here. So when I went to council as an individual sort of resident of the community and really objected, like others, to the proposal, the height of it, just the lack of connection to the community and whatnot, and then seeing this, wearing my ADP hat, I have to say that this is an improvement. A significant improvement I feel, over the last proposal. I like the fact that there are 2 buildings rather than 1. It's much less monolithic, much less institutional. There's less shadow being cast, certainly on the Cedar side. There's a step back now. It's just like less monolithic. So I want to acknowledge the improvements that have been made in this latest iteration. And that there's like more varied facades and whatnot, and more thought has gone into creating a less institutional looking development on the whole. So again, acknowledging that. But that said, I also want to state that I entirely agree with my fellow panelists in their comments as well. I don't think I need to reiterate most of those. at this point. I basically, I really liked the way Mallory put it. It's too big and too dense for this site. 92 units. We need affordable housing for sure. We need housing, we need rental housing, and we need a mix. And it doesn't give me much comfort to know that out of the 15% that will be allocated for affordable, that you haven't really sort of considered the percentage of that for the different types of units that would be for affordable housing. I heard a comment early on that it could be just the studio units. So I don't know, just kind of weighing all these things out, and these things are all interconnected. When I think of design, it's not just it's like the form and its relationship to sort of to the community as such. And for me, there's our role in advising council, but I also feel not only as a member of a community, but also as this panel, that I think there's some accountability to the community. And I also take to heart the comments that have been made by the community members, very well thought out comments, both in terms of design and sort of beyond the scope of design. And I just want to be on record to state that I really have appreciated how much thought has gone into the community, by the community, into this. And it disturbs me that the proponent did not actually respond directly to the community. It's always gone directly to the city in terms of the interaction around this proposal on the whole. So that saddens me a great deal that there wasn't this kind of interaction with the community, and maybe that's out of scope here. But for me, this weighs on these sort of deliberations as well. What is the accountability? What accountability do we have in our deliberations to the community, and that of the proponents as well? So, you know, when Mallory states that, you know, this is too big, too dense for this site for people to be happy, that really lands for me. When I think about not just the people that are moving in there, but the impact on the people that live there as well. So I'm, you know, I just, you know, sort of, those are sort of my general comments. And I, you know, the fact you've taken out 5, you were proposing, like emerald, like maples grow to a significant height, and you're proposing linden trees, like smaller trees, like that. Some of the substitutions you've made actually don't add to the livability of the site at all. I'd like to see those maples restored, or at least more of a combination between the maples and the lindens if need be. There's certainly, at the very least, should also be another rooftop amenity on the Bray building, and not just on the Ypres building. Permeable paving, like almost like that whole sort of hardened area for parking and whatnot on the exterior side, that's almost a third of the site as well. And that's all hardened surface now. And sort of no nod around permeability for that. So anyway, those are sort of my general comments. I'm just, so I feel there have been improvements that have been made, but not enough. And it's still like too much for a site like that. Yes, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I concur, Mr. Chair. There are, from what I can see from the 2 presentations, there are some minimal improvements in this presentation, and I do appreciate the efforts, Matthew and James, that you've made to set back the building on the Ypres side, and the separation, although it had a lot to do with the hydro situation and the fire rating, as you pointed out, James, it did cut down on the massing, but it doesn't help the matter enough. And I think there's our Bray side connection is just so massive, and with its back turned to the community, I just find it a bit of an affront on the community. We did some planning about 20 years ago with the Downtown Neighborhood Revitalization Committee, and we found there's the city, I believe they still have a right of way that's just right across the street, goes in behind the church, runs along the top of the bank, and then brings you down alongside of the Duncan garage. There's I always wanted it to be opened up into a laneway. Councillor Bruce, if you could dig that one up with your works department. There's a sewer line that goes along that top, so goes in behind the Union Hall and so on. And well, needless to say, we had a lot of stuff we embellished along the way, but it is a right of way. It's a right of way that we could actually turn into a sidewalk for the people on this mound to connect them to the downtown core. And what better way than to have a formal, opening or punctuation on that Bray Street side that embraces that walkway that the city could contribute to this project should it go ahead in any way, shape, or form. But it's a way of utilizing what we've got and bringing a better overall presentation forward. I know we have to speak to the guidelines specifically. I think we've addressed them enough times here already, from sustainability to future proofing or even current proofing, green space lack of, community gardens lack of, setbacks, step backs, and just to put it into perspective, a 200 square meter, a 20 square meter micro unit is 215 square feet. That's just a little bit larger than a 20-foot sea can. So we are talking micro here. I know it's the minimum, but we seem to be looking at a series of minimums and maximums here. So it's just putting that size into perspective. I would think a 215 square foot unit would be affordable, just simply because it would have to be. But I think enough said. I just simply can't support this project going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David. If there isn't any further discussion, maybe we can just sort of now talk about moving forward in this. I mean, yes, Kyle, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just looking at the ADP's terms of reference, so just in terms of meeting procedures, so after the panel members have had a chance to discuss the application, the terms say that the applicant shall be invited to make any final comments, and then after that, the panel can make the recommendations.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you. Yes. I'm not that familiar with the procedures, having just stepped into this role for today, so I appreciate that, Kyle. Thank you. Matthew, or one of the other representatives, if you wish to.
Yeah, well, thanks to the panel for your time today. I hope after your deliberations, we can get some recommendations on where you want to see changes to the proposal, and then we can look at how we can integrate them into the overall design. So I appreciate the comments, and I think there's a lot of good ideas here. Yeah, we'd just be looking for that sort of formalized direction on where to take this next.
Okay, thank you. So we're at 11:30 right now. And looking at the proposed motions and choosing one of those, I think maybe we could also offer up our own. This is just like a suggested motion, like in the on the agenda here. It would seem to me that the first one probably we can rule out. Taking a temperature read amongst the four panelists, I don't think any of us are proposing that we accept the application as presented. Is that correct? Okay. All right, so we can rule that out. So how, in terms of moving forward, should we come up with a set of recommendations then to try and improve this proposal to kind of get behind it to some degree? Or are we just like, we don't support it at all and provide a number of reasons? Or unless there's another alternative to those two motions? Curious to know your thoughts. Yes, David.
Eduardo, it's pretty hard to support it with the number of objections we got with the project. I mean, they're not small fixes. I think they've listened to the dialogue here, and it's a sizable change here. And if we give recommendations, then it simply goes to council for them to adjudicate whether those recommendations are adequate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no guarantee that these changes will actually be made by the time they get to council. It's just recommendations. So no, I simply wouldn't. I cannot recommend the project go forward as it's presented. Period.
Okay, noted. Mallory? Or...
Yeah, I also, I didn't mention, I appreciate that, certain changes have been made to try to, adjust some of the facades and things like that. But there's also been pieces that have been lost, like the large public stair. One thing I didn't mention earlier is when you normally, with happy cities, happy homes, when you have over 100 residents, normally you have public washroom facilities or some sort of amenity building for the two buildings together to kind of have some public washrooms, a drinking fountain, all these things. I mean, if you're in one building and then you have to go to the other building and then go upstairs to the rooftop amenity. Now you got to go to the bathroom. Now you got to go all the way back to your own building, or you want to fill up with a water bottle, all these things. I just think that it's just one example. And I think for me, I don't feel that residents will be overly happy here. I mean, I think I understand that there's kind of a mantra right now that all housing is good housing, right? Because everybody, the push for affordable housing, as many units as possible, all housing is good housing. But we are facing a crisis where, social isolation is real. Vancouver is said to be one of the most socially isolated cities in the world. And I think that the social connectivity and the amenity spaces just aren't really meeting that yet for me. So because of that, I think it would be in the best interests of the community to not support this development and the way that it is designed currently.
Okay, just making some notes here. Okay, oh yes, go ahead, Paige. You're on. You're muted.
Sorry, there's no way for us both to have sound on in the same room. So I just wanted to note, I hear a mover and a seconder on the third option presented on the agenda there, so that the advisory design panel does not support the development permit application. However, there's space in there for the ADP to provide reasons, and the reasons ideally will point back to what elements of the development permit area guidelines they feel this proposal does not achieve. So I'm going to pass it back to you guys for further discussion, but just know I'm making notes, and if you'd like me to summarize, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah. Councillor Bruce, any other?
No, I totally agree with David and Mallory particularly, and I don't feel good about this development on this piece of land. We have a tremendous green space lack of, and of course that's not the developer's fault for sure. That's the city's fault, all of my fault. But I just can't. I can't see. It's too much. It's too massive, and I can't support it. I'm non-voting on this group here, by the way. But anyways, I can't support this the way it is.
Okay. And as for myself, I'm very much on the same page as my fellow panel members here. Some of the points that I've taken down, would be good to hear from you, Paige, on this as well, in terms of what you're sort of recording. But I'm full in terms of reasons that I'm not supporting it, similar to my colleagues here. A lack of sufficient amenities for a project that will sort of like house upwards of 200 people. Social connectivity is lacking. I agree, it's not in the best interest of the community as it's currently proposed. It's just way too dense, and there's the sustainability. There's no sustainability plan really for this. Even though it's kind of like a modern design, it is not a 21st century project that we can be proud of for Duncan at this point. Like so I'm not feeling really good about this either. And so for those reasons, and as such, procedurally, we are, I guess, on the third motion here, right? That we do not support this proposal for the reasons that I've just outlined, but perhaps Paige, maybe you can make them more succinctly, or I don't want to put you on the spot.
Okay, can you hear me now? Perfect. All right. So what I wrote down earlier, and just partly because the applicant has asked for some clear direction, and so social connectivity, although it's clearly a worthy thing to point out, certain what specific actions could be taken to address that. But what I have written down, please tell me if this is correct, is that the ADP would like to see increased permeability on the site, that you'd like to see an improvement to the green space or lack thereof. And I keep hearing about a mid-block connection or that public stairway. There was a desire to see larger trees on site. And we talked quite a bit about the rooftop amenity and the fact that it was only included on one building. So, and finally, there was a mention of the affordable housing component and the desire to see that including a mixture of unit types. And then, of course, the lack of sufficient public amenities or the public amenities or public washrooms, even in the public amenity spaces. So I have 5 points. Is what I've written down there, what the committee would like to see passed on?
David.
Well, I think we could add step backs. Step backs could be applied to the Bray Street side of the project, which is, I still believe, is in contravention of the guidelines, that not enough effort has been made to soften the facade on the Bray Street side to fit into the community and just to address the guidelines. So we have to address guideline issues here. That's a strong, probably one of the oldest, strongest guideline issues here that we've got to present. And that would apply also to the south facade of the Bray Street side as well. I feel the massing there is also oversized. There's some justification to the north side of the Bray Street side because it's adjacent to the Cedars. I can see those two working together as elevations of one, and I understand that. But if you if you have respect to the south properties, the properties to the south, I think there should be some stepping back there, even though it's not a street facade or a street frontage. It's just tipping your hat to the neighbor design is what I feel.
Okay, so this list is really a set of improvements, but we are sort of dealing with the third motion. So are we stating this in such a way that we don't approve this, that we don't support this application because all the following elements have not been incorporated?
Addressed, correct.
Okay.
There's a few other things. I mean, I think with, it's one thing to say to, increase the green space, but I think what we're talking about is a significant increase to the green space on site, because there is going to be a heat island effect that takes place here, a significant one. I understand that the parkades on the lower level create problems for big trees, but I think, if it could be as easy as saying to, we want rooftop amenity spaces on both buildings, I would say, with significant green space and covered weather protected outdoor areas so that they can be used seasonally. I think that that's important. I think, of course, increased permeability on the site, that's a no-brainer. I think that we should ask the applicant to provide a sustainability plan or something, because I know that is in the OCP to have a sustainability plan for the development, and I don't see one here. I think that another thing in downtown core urban areas is public art. And I would ask, something along the lines of provide, pleasant visual stimulation along the building edges and pathways, something along those lines. And I think that, they increase density, increase some of the amenity, decrease density, increase the amenity areas, increase the green space, and really think about the livability. It could still be a good project. The livability needs to be increased, in my opinion.
So scale down.
Scaled down with more green space and just a lot less concrete. I mean, yeah, I think it's just kind of it seems logical. Yeah.
Okay. Kyle.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just speaking to that last point, we're not permitted to ask the applicants to reduce the density. They're complying with the zoning. The maximum density is 3.1 floor area ratio. The development's at 2.6. That's not a request that the advisory design panel can make.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to say reduced density. I understand that it's within the guidelines, but I think what it needs to increase the livability, more green space, more areas for residents, and specifically weather protected. I think that's incredibly important here.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor, which is sort of like a variation of the third on the agenda, that the ADP does not support DPA 2022-02 for 365 Ypres as presented, due to the, I'm just trying to figure out the wording around this, due to the following elements not having been addressed, or like how yeah. Kyle?
Mr. Chair, I think it's just that third recommendation, right? I mean, it reads that the advisory design panel does not support the development permit application as presented for the following reasons, and Paige has that list of reasons.
Okay. So yes, go ahead.
Would you like me to read out the list of reasons? So,
yeah.
Permeability on site is not sufficient. Green space on site is not sufficient. The lack of mid-block connection, and I just wrote stairway. The replacement of the larger trees with smaller trees. Desire to see a rooftop amenity on both buildings. Desire to see step backs on Bray Street and the south facade of the Bray Street building. Lack of sufficient public amenity space. Lack of covered weather protected public space. I'm going to merge those two. Lack of sustainability plan. Lack of inclusion of public art. And I wasn't sure where the committee landed on improved, desire to see improved livability. Is that a piece, is that a concept that is clear enough, and does it align with the development permit area guidelines? Or is there specific aspects of livability that could be addressed?
Is that permeability? Is that what you were discussing, Paige?
Sorry, no, the last point was permeability. Or sorry, it was livability.
Oh, livability.
Yes, go ahead, Chief, or Chief Counselor.
Yeah.
They live in different worlds.
Yeah, same to you, fella. I think the livability probably should be listed. Don't you think so, David? The livability aspects that we're looking for. Anyway, if it's coming to council, I feel that the more I've said this before, the more direct and the more articulate we are, the easier it is for council to get their head around it. If we just say livability, we at the council table don't really know what you're talking about. So I think we have to list what we want. Thank you.
Mallory,
I think a lot of those. I think a lot of those livability comments are captured in Mallory's points, mostly in the form of amenities and so on. I just wanted to add one small one there, Paige, and that is the Bray Street side. Although I did mention setbacks, step backs, not the setbacks, the step backs, and massing. But I also brought up earlier the color articulation just seemed to be lacking on that side as well.
Yeah.
It looks like the back of the building compared to the south and east elevations, which I will admit James has done a great job with. I don't have any issues with the aesthetics, but they seem to be lacking on that Bray Street side as if it's been forgotten. And that to me is the community side of this building. It speaks to the downtown core, and I want to see the downtown core connection there. I don't see it. I see it's a wall. To me, it's a wall to the downtown core, and I just take that aesthetically as a bit of an affront. That's all. I thought they could do a better job connecting to the downtown core.
Okay. Thank you, David. Paige, do you want to read back just that last point? Because I think we're good with all the others.
Okay, great. So I've taken off livability because I think that was captured under the other aspects around public amenity space and the weather protected covered public space. I think that's what I just heard. And then I added into the point around step backs, the comment about massing on Bray Street and the south facade of Bray Street, as well as color articulation.
Sorry, Paige, could you possibly change the weather protected public space to weather protected amenity space? Because I'm not talking about a public space.
Yeah.
You know, even a lot of buildings of this scale will have a little amenity building. I mean, that's very common where, you know, you have a set of washrooms, like let's say in that playground area or something like that, and a kitchen where people can get together and have social meals and things like that. And one of the things that could maybe even really help this project would be, you know, it's one thing to say weather protected amenity space, but maybe it's a weather protected amenity space or amenity building for the residents or amenity space in general. It's just not there. There's outdoor spaces, but I don't see an interior amenity space.
Gotcha. So lack of sufficient amenity space, including covered weather protected amenity space.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. I just want to make sure that the amenity space isn't just exterior because it rains for a large portion of the year here.
Yeah, it's a good catch. Okay, so process-wise, should we just read back the motion in its entirety and then move it?
Sure, yeah, let's do it that way. Okay, so sorry, I don't have it in front of me, that the advisory design panel does not support development permit application number DP 2022-02 for 365 Ypres Street as presented for the following reasons. Reason number one, permeability on the site is not sufficient. Green space on site is not sufficient. Lack of mid-block connection is desired. The lack of larger trees included in the landscape plan. Rooftop amenity or lack of rooftop amenity on both buildings. Lack of sufficient amenity space, including covered weather protected amenity space. Step backs and massing on Bray Street. The southern facade on Bray Street building and the color articulation are all lacking. There's a desire to see a sustainability plan included, a desire to see public art included, and also that affordability piece. There's a desire to see the affordable housing component include a mixture of unit types.
Okay. So you'll just flip those around to lack of, just so that we're consistent.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Consistent messaging.
Working off of my notes here, so it will read. These are the reasoning. This is the reasons why you did not support this proposal as presented.
Okay, great.
All in favor?
Okay, the motion is passed. thank you very much to the proponents and taking your time to present to us this morning. I guess at this point we can just move to adjourn. Oh, Kyle, yes? Oh, Mallory, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just a procedural question or comment. So, you know, the applicant's obviously going to take what they've heard today and potentially make some changes to their submission. At that point, the application may proceed to council. And as the panel knows, the terms allow for a member of the panel to present at council on behalf of the panel. And usually what we do is, what staff do is when we have that revised submission and we know a council meeting date, we'll send that to the panel. But I just thought it might be helpful, maybe perhaps, to predetermine who from the panel is going to attend council, if you want to speak to this item. Is that fair?
No. No, I wouldn't think it's fair. I think it should come back to the ADP with this many changes.
No, so Mr. through the chair to the panel, the terms are clear that the application will not return to the panel.
It'll be a new application.
It will not. Sorry, through the chair to David. No, it will not be a new application. The terms say that the panel has an opportunity to review the application and make recommendations to council, but it's possible that this application will go to council. It's not going to return to the advisory design panel unless council wants further input from the panel. So it's not a new application, it's the same application. And so what I'm suggesting is that the panel decide now if you want someone to represent the panel. If this goes forward to council, you can do that now. You don't have to, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, in the past, I mean, this is a an ongoing issue around like the process around what comes back, what doesn't. That's a side issue around the terms of reference. I think we need to deal with at some point. But in terms of the proposal right now, it has worked well in the past where we've had representation at council. The problem is, like, unless you know when this is going to council, it's really hard to kind of commit at this point. Like, I think conceptually we can, because it tends to be a good idea to have representation from a panel member. Certainly one amongst one of us that have been in attendance at this particular meeting to speak to this, for sure. I think, and I'd be willing to do that, but I can't commit because I don't know when it is. And when we've had that situation in the past, the chair has put forward an email asking if someone else could do it on their behalf. And I'm more than happy if either David or Mallory at this point, if you wanted to represent as well. Even if it's just like conceptually, because we just, we don't know what the date is.
Right.
Yes,
is council still meeting Zoom, or are they meeting in person?
Council is meeting in person.
In person.
Mr. Chair, I mean, if that process works for you, where we just, you kind of communicate by email. Normally, we ask that the panel, restrict its business to the scheduled panel meeting. But if it's just really who can attend, who actually has time in their schedule to attend the council meeting, if you want to do it by email, that's probably fine. Unless Paige, you have any other thoughts on that? No. Okay.
That works. That's fine. We'll work it out once we know a date.
Okay. I just think generally it's been a good idea to have representation there. I think it's really helped council in the past to understand better sometimes, and it's just good anyway to have a panel member there in general. So I think it's a good process to continue. Okay.
So
go ahead.
Can I go one more time here?
Yes.
So our committee here now, our ADP, is going to recommend that we support it with those recommendations we don't recommend.
That's right. We are not recommending the project to council.
unless these other things are met.
Well, based on the following reasons, like that page. So like one has to follow the other. Otherwise it gets really messy between like, so just to be clear, like we are not supporting this at all because of the reasons that Paige has outlined around green spaces, lack of green. A lot of it, the language will be lack of.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, motion to adjourn. Okay, Mallory, seconded by David. So we are adjourning at 12:58 on Thursday, November 25th.
It's 11:58.
24th. Yes, 11:58. Thank you.